Too bad about that Batgirl movie being cancelled. But at least there was a Birds of Prey movie. Bit of Barbara Gordon representation, love to see it. Let me check who they cast. Wait, where is she? Birds of Prey is a lot of fun. When it came out and I watched it for the first time, I didn't really know all that much about the characters they were using, so I stepped into it with very little in terms of bias or background information. From that perspective, this movie is really good, at least in my opinion. It sticks to the silly sort of fun you might expect from Harley as she was established in Suicide Squad, while dialing down the sexualization and giving her some long past due agency. It has a very clearly defined identity in a way that felt very fresh for the DCEU. This being the first R-rated project was definitely an element of this, but you can tell this more by the stylistic choices throughout. It especially pops out at me in the police station, where she uses a beanbag / confetti / smoke grenade launcher instead of a gun, has the fight in the sprinklers, and the Coca-Cola fight. It's really cool in terms of color, lighting, and choreography. Regardless, I had a very different perspective rewatching it after a few years. While I definitely still enjoy the film a lot, knowing stuff about these characters really changed the way I saw the story. I'll get into that in more detail later, but outside of my connection to these characters, I noticed that the broader context around the DCEU was an important factor for this film as well. It exists in this kind of weird area between being disconnected from the broader DCEU like Shazam and Blue Beetle, and being firmly a part of the main story of the universe. I think this movie could have been really good with just a couple changes, so instead of making a dedicated video rewriting it, I'll be incorporating that into this one. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the relationship this movie has with the rest of the universe, because it's complicated. Let's start at the beginning, with Harley Quinn. She was introduced in Suicide Squad, where she played one of the main roles. After that, there were plans to make a Harley and Joker movie with Jared Leto. This obviously didn't end up happening, but it laid the groundwork for this film to be made. In the original version of the film, Joker was out to kill Harley, which would lead to their breakup for obvious reasons. This was changed for the end product. Outside of Harley Quinn, none of the characters in this film appear in any other DCEU project. Essentially, Harley is the through line, but that's not how it was supposed to go. A Black Canary project was announced, and eventually cancelled. It would have gone hard as fuck though. You know how much better we would be eating if there was a live-action Black Canary solo project? It's okay, we got Canary Black instead. No, it's not. It's not okay. I'm not okay. So, we have a movie that, on paper, could really go either way. It could either play very close to DCEU canon, with a story about Harley Quinn and her breakup with the Joker at its core, this wouldn't be surprising, or it could make a point of doing its own thing. Give a new, better version of Harley Quinn, with a story standing alone, independent of the Joker, Batman, and anything else set up in the DCEU. They took the second of those options, and in my opinion, it worked out very well. It's a charming story, if you don't watch it as a Birds of Prey movie. Listen, I'm not exactly an expert on most of these characters. I'd like to say I know a fair bit about Black Canary for obvious reasons, but characters like Huntress and Renee Montoya are kind of out of my area of expertise. I've heard very mixed things about them both, especially a few negative things about Montoya. I know a lot of people like both of these characters for their aesthetic elements, but I can't say I've seen that many people that are fans of the characters in the comics talk about them, so I want to mostly abstain from commenting on that. I will, however, talk about the other characters, starting with Barbara Gordon. Wait, okay, she wasn't in the movie, but starting with Barbara Gordon. A solid 95% of the world will either not know who Barbara Gordon is or go, oh yeah, Batgirl. But that is cringe! My friends, my compatriots, we must stay strong! Oracle will forever be the superior title. For those who don't know, Barbara used to be Batgirl, starting with that title in the 1960s. Then, the killing joke happened. She was shot by the Joker and paralyzed in a failed attempt to prove the whole one bad day thing. And so, she was fucked over. She was permanently injured for a story about 3 men, but it wasn't even considered from Barbara's perspective. That only happened in 1996, almost a decade later. Furthermore, when pitching it, Len Wein, the editor at the time, encouraged writer Alan Moore to paralyze her with some insane language. John Ostrander, known as the creator of the Suicide Squad, and his frequent collaborator Kim Yale took it upon themselves to continue her story. In Suicide Squad, she got a new identity as Oracle. This is one of the most inspiring stories in comics, in my opinion. Taking a character that was thrown away by editorial and using her disability, a part of how she was discarded with the ableist industry standards, to make her a more effective hero than ever before. It's very empowering, both through a feminist lens, taking into account the fridging, and from a disability studies lens. This went on into Birds of Prey, which was initially a book about just Black Canary and Oracle. It was kind of like World's Finest for Batman and Superman, but with these two. After Gil Simone took over the book, she added Huntress and later Zinda Blake into the mix, and from there a number of characters have been added, and it's become a massive team of mostly female members. So why the fuck isn't she in this movie? The title is literally her book. Disgusting work. Oh, and did you think we were done talking about Queerbaiting comics? Nope, because in 2011, the New 52 happened, and oh boy, they really took everything that's so great about the character, like her relationships to characters her age and the dynamics with younger characters like Cassandra Cain, her development, especially with her disability, etc., and they took it away. They de-aged her to make her relationship with Dick Grayson work better, and they ditched her disability. DC editorial really knows two things: make Batman books and disrespect female characters. And guess what? They kind of did that with the DCEU. They made a Birds of Prey movie, and they cut her from her own team. Then they announced a version that aged her down, and then they cancelled it after filming. DC, try not to fuck over Barbara Gordon challenge, impossible. Actually, add another one to that. DCEU tried to not adapt the New 52 challenge, even more impossible. Seriously, Justice League is just the New 52 lineup minus Green Lantern. Then there's Wonder Woman and her origins. Shazam and Black Adam are kinda just like the New 52 story from Shazam Origins, which was printed in Justice League issues. And they were going to make a Batgirl movie where she's 1/4 Bruce's age. Why? No one likes the New 52. Maybe 3 Aquaman fans that have only read that run and nothing else, but I don't think I've ever heard someone unironically defend the New 52. I mean, listen, my top 3 are Green Arrow, Black Canary, and Superman, so I'm obviously biased on this, but the New 52 is terrible by all accounts. We're now at a time where we can zero in on Black Canary. I'll try and limit the amount I talk about comics, but we have to talk about a couple things first. Starting with the new Absolute comics. Absolute Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are super popular for good reason, with The Flash, Green Lantern, and Martian Manhunter coming soon after. This universe is all about taking away a character's core qualities. For Batman, it's his money. For Wonder Woman, it's the mascara, etc. They're really good, especially because they're not mainline. We have the normal characters, but these subversions exist at the same time, being able to take full creative freedom. So far, there's been no mention of Absolute Black Canary or Birds of Prey. But don't worry, if you want a Black Canary that completely lacks the core of the character, look no further than the New 52. Black Canary has a pretty complicated history. The original Black Canary, Dinah Drake, lived on Earth 2, which is where most of the Golden Age characters lived. Eventually, she moved to Earth 1 after the death of her husband, Larry. Later, she starts a relationship with Green Arrow. Where the complications set in is that her mind was transported into her daughter's body, because Dinah Drake was dying and Dinah Lance was in suspended animation. This was later retconned, so don't worry about it. Post-Crisis, they're completely separate characters, still mother and daughter, but different minds. A crucial part of the character is that she's an incredibly dedicated hero. I've said in a previous video that Black Canary is the quintessential superhero next to Superman. That's not just bias talking. While other characters like Spider-Man or Wonder Woman may be more iconic as heroes, Black Canary uniquely embodies the lust for heroism. She is surrounded by heroes, with her mother and the rest of the JSA, and later the Birds of Prey, Justice League, and Arrow family. Essentially, she's always wanted to become a hero, but her mother stopped her for a while. Nevertheless, she eventually succeeded. And then there's the New 52. They just decided to remove all the heroes around her in favor of having her grow up on the street and be a singer, because as we all know, if you have sonic powers, you must be good at singing. It's safe to say that Black Canary enjoyers aren't the biggest fan. If this was an alternate universe where the point was to take the core of the character away, maybe they'd still have to add some stuff to tether it back to the character as she is on her own, but at least it'd be better than mainline. As you've probably guessed by now, this movie adapted the New 52. They didn't make her the lead vocalist of a band, but they did have her sing in a club. Most importantly, they didn't really have her as a hero in this movie. Like, here, watch this. What? What the fuck do you mean? This is why cutting Dinah's relationship with her mother doesn't work. She's no longer the hero she's supposed to be when she doesn't grow up idolizing heroes. A lot of people seem to take issue with her fighting style, or that she only uses the Canary Cry once at the end, but I don't really care about that all too much. The fight choreography clearly has a very specific vibe that they're going for, and it's not like she's getting beat up at all, so I just don't get the issue. She didn't lose a fight in the movie once, and only got hit twice. Meanwhile, she beat up like 16 guys, and that's not even counting the Canary Cry. So what if it just looks a little less like John Wick? I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing. Also, the Canary Cry is used as an element of her connection to her mother. Yeah, she only uses it once at the very end, but that's kind of the point. Her arc of learning to embrace heroism after it killed her mother is pretty well done. It makes no fucking sense for Black Canary, but I like the way it's executed at least. But why the fuck does she use a gun? Joni Smollett is a good casting, even if she never got to do as much as she should have. If only she could have gotten a solo show. Alright, I'll keep this last one short, but man, was Cassandra Cain done dirty. First appearing in 1999 in the No Man's Land story, Cass has had a pretty difficult history. Being a victim of extensive abuse at the hand of her father, David Cain, she didn't learn to speak growing up. She's been depicted in a number of different ways, with some extensive fuckery on the editorial side. Some of her depictions are worse than others, but something she's never been is a petty thief? Wait, what? Yeah, so she's a pickpocket in the movie. That's kind of out of nowhere. Cass Cain is supposed to be one of the best fighters in the DC universe, with an extremely strong relationship to Batman and to Oracle. Safe to say that this version of the character isn't much in the way of an adaptation. The only things that they got right were her name, gender, and vague ethnicity. No other element of the character was translated into this movie at all. Alongside poor adaptation, this movie got a lot of criticism for queerbaiting. For the uninitiated, queerbaiting is the practice of marketing a piece of media as being about or having queer relationships, only for it to be either completely missing from the end product or greatly limited. This film manages to do it in not one, not two, but 3 ways. At the same time, let's start at the beginning. The main character of the film, Harley Quinn, has been openly bisexual for a while now in the comics. Her relationship with Poison Ivy is pretty iconic by now. This wasn't necessarily confirmed, but there was a certain expectation that her queerness, being an important part of the character, would be present in the movie. The director has even said that she'd want to do the relationship in the sequel. In the opening of the film, she's confirmed to be bisexual, but this is never acted upon. She mentions once in passing that she's had her heart broken by men and women, but they never do anything with this beyond a passing mention. The same thing happens with Renee Montoya. She works with her ex-girlfriend, Ellen Yee, who is assistant DA. This, again, is very brief and isn't really relevant to the story. They come off more as friends that went different ways than exes. There's very little romantic or sexual tension to speak of, and it's hardly addressed. It's a way of hand-waving away the character's queerness without really engaging with it. Finally, there's Roman Sionis and Victor Zsasz. They were never confirmed to be in a relationship, but when asked in interviews about the potential romantic entanglement of the characters, the actors danced around the question, leading to people thinking they would be in a relationship. This didn't really happen. It's hinted at very minimally, but never takes a real role in the movie. So we have 4 major characters who are either confirmed or hinted at being queer, 2 of which are canonically queer both in this movie and in the source material, and 0 queer relationships. Congratulations. There's a lot of easy changes to make to this movie that would instantly make it much better for everyone involved. As mentioned previously, this movie is really good if you don't watch it as a Birds of Prey movie. So the first change is to make it, not a Birds of Prey movie. That's right, it's Green Arrow and those women. No, shut up. Instead of Birds of Prey, make it a Gotham City Sirens movie. A big chunk of the movie can stay the same. Harley being the main focus can work, especially when we change it to the Sirens. From there, 2 big characters that make up the Sirens are missing, namely Catwoman and Poison Ivy. So how do they fit in? Well, it's a lot easier than you might think. This version of Black Canary is already pretty close to Catwoman. Growing up on the street, victim of circumstance turned reluctant hero, ties to the criminal underworld of Gotham. There'd have to be some changes to make it work, of course, but it's a step in the right direction. Then we get to Poison Ivy. There's not really a one-to-one comparison between Poison Ivy and any of the 3 remaining birds, so we'll have to get a little bit more creative. I think the best option is to have Poison Ivy fill Huntress's and Cassandra Cain's role in the film. She goes on a vengeful killing spree on Sionis' company. Her specific motivation can be any number of things. Pollution is the obvious one, but given the theme of emancipation, it is literally in the title, sorta, it makes more sense to tie it into that. In her usual origins, she's poisoned by someone, which is what gives her her current form. More recent versions are crusading against corporations. We can combine these 2 to have a corporation, namely Sionis, indirectly responsible for her being poisoned. We can have her kill the person that poisoned her at the start, similarly to the start of the film, where Huntress kills a bunch of mobsters. Afterwards, she'll go after Black Mask and his friends. After killing her attempted murderer, she stole something important. It being a diamond works thematically, with the whole diamonds are a girl's best friend thing, and the diamond literally saving Harley's life. There's a lot of talk about changing Cassandra Cain to Harper Row, but I don't think that would help much. I think we're probably better off cutting that character from the movie completely. I get the whole appeal to innocence thing as an extension of the theme of women fighting against the man, specifically oppressing them, a physical manifestation of patriarchal expectations around women's grief, reactions to breakups, and dependence on men. However, I think the theme can work on its own with just 3 main characters, especially if we're given some more time to get to know each of these characters personally and develop their relationships as we go along. In the original movie, they only really get together at the end to fight Sionis and his men. If we turn up their relationships a bit, especially Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, we can make it a more cohesive movie. The theme of emancipation can be touched upon with all 3 main characters, similarly to how it's done in the original movie. Harley's relationship to both the Joker and Black Mask, although in different ways, can stay more or less the same. The same is true for Black Canary, now Catwoman, and her community and Black Mask. For Poison Ivy, the course of her life was changed by Black Mask. Her obsession to get revenge is a different kind of control he has over her. She'll slowly inch away from the path of vengeance for vengeance's sake. She'll still be firmly a villain, but have her own path outside of just reacting to what others, specifically men in her life, have done to her. None of this would take away from the fact that the Sirens kill Black Mask at the end, but it did shift that from the endpoint of their motivation to just this cool thing they do. It's supposed to be their first time working together, not their last. To do all this, we have to give Catwoman and Poison Ivy a lot more time to shine. Huntress only appears outside of flashbacks at 16 minutes and 50 seconds into the movie. Black Canary only appears at all at 20 minutes and 42 seconds, around a fifth of the movie. Pulling that to a bit earlier would help make it a Gotham City Sirens movie rather than a Harley Quinn and These Other People movie, as it was in the original. The part where this gets tricky is with Montoya. In the original, she was the connective tissue between the different parts of the story, which works for that movie, but won't here. Since Montoya isn't a part of the Sirens, it'd be best to limit that part of the story. The police being, in some ways, an extension of patriarchal society, we can make Black Mask having a hold on the GCPD work easily. The cops are already antagonists in the original movie. Taking Montoya out just removes the more nuanced insight into the film and makes them a little more one-dimensional. But that's perfectly fine. Montoya serves to emphasize the patriarchal element in the police department. Taking her out to do that in a different way wouldn't necessarily harm the film. That can also give Black Mask and Zsasz a little more time to shine, and we can understand them a little more. Black Mask has a handful of really good scenes. We could have more intricate relationships with him and other characters if we give them more time. This really isn't all that complicated, but it really doesn't have to be. I think most of this movie can stay more or less the same, and work with a couple of name changes. Sionis captures and threatens Harley, she goes after Poison Ivy, they form a connection, they team up with Catwoman, whose pesky moral compass keeps putting her in danger even though she's desperately trying to just get by before giving up and joining the fight. As long as we keep this score and expand upon it during the movie, we'll be just fine. Have Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn kiss at the end after killing Sionis, beautiful, done. I stand by my opinion that this movie is really good, as anything but a Birds of Prey movie. If you shave off the names, it's very fun and has some decent thematic work underneath. There's very few mainstream movies that use color as well as this movie. Like seriously, name me one superhero movie more colorful than Birds of Prey and it actually serves a purpose. There's a few questionable decisions. The music choice, for example, is a bit hit or miss in my opinion, but it serves its purpose and reinforces the themes, so that's alright. There's very valid arguments against this movie, the adaptation thing being the biggest. The three groups I see hating on this movie are Birds of Prey fans, misogynists, and people that haven't actually seen the movie. One of those three is based, and the others are cringe. I'll let you decide which one is which. This movie would be an S tier for me if it weren't for the adaptation thing. However, it is kind of hard to ignore. Given the fact that I first watched this before really getting into comics, I'm biased in favor of it. Therefore, I'm gonna put it in A tier ahead of Aquaman. Let me know in the comments what side of the discourse you fall on. Do you like the movie, or do you hate it, and why? I'm gonna go eat an egg sandwich. Nobody better disturb me. Have a good one.